Hello everyone! Good afternoon po sa ating lahat. First of all, we'd like to apologize for starting a bit late. We encountered a few technical glitches, pero hindi po kami matigilan. Patuloy po ang ating seminar, ang ating webinar session for this afternoon. Maraming salamat po for joining us again. This is our second day of the webinar series, Education Continuity Plan, Learn to Continue the Learning Experience Beyond the Four Walls of the Classroom. So, salamat po sa mga nag-join sa amin kahapon. I'm sure marami kayong natutunan. Nabasa po namin yung mga feedback nyo on our Facebook page. Maraming salamat po sa mga comments and mga realizations po ninyo. And we are happy that you are actually getting a lot of insight from yesterday's talk. And just to give everyone a background kung bakit po namin ginawa itong webinar series, it's because as you all know, marami pong usapin na debate. Kumbaga, marami po nagdedebate kung dapat po bang ipagpatuloy ang edukasyon ngayong school year na ito. At kami po sa enterprises, naniniwala po kami na maaaring mapagpatuloy natin ang edukasyon dahil marami naman pong paraan na maaari natin gawin para po successfully mapagpatuloy ang pag-aaral ng mga bata. And this event is brought to you by Big Pond Enterprises in partnership with Microsoft Philippines, Nuadu, an assessment platform, and St. Augustine Publications, Inc. Yes, and I am Micaela Ramos. I am Big Pond Enterprises General Manager, and I will be your moderator for the entire week. And again, my heartfelt thanks for patiently waiting. Alam ko po it's a minor inconvenience for you, but I hope your wait and your time will be well spent with us this afternoon. So before we jump right in, I have a few reminders for our participants. Again, you have the opportunity to send in your questions. Sa inyong mga apps, you can type in the questions you have for our speaker today, and we will try to answer them at the end of the talk. So right now, I say that we may not be able to read all the questions, but we will choose the best question that is most relevant to our discussion. And next, we are happy to say that we are giving out a raffle prize every day, which is a Microsoft t-shirt and a pen, and we will deliver it to your address if you see your name on the screen at the end of the talk today, just send us a message on our Facebook page, and give us your address, and we promise you will get the. And we've also been receiving a lot of questions about the certificate of participation. Yes, we are giving out certificate of participation sa lahat po ng ng aming feedback form, which we will be giving at the end of the webinar series. Meaning sa Friday po, May 29, we will be announcing the feedback form link. And once you complete that, we will send you an e-certificate po. And lastly, we have been receiving a lot of inquiries about the free Microsoft A1 license assistance. Yes, we are promising that. For you to avail that, just present or reply to the email we sent kung nasaan po nakalagay yung certificate of participation ninyo, and indicate that you would want to avail of our free Microsoft A1 assistance. All right. I guess that's it for our seminar reminders. If you have any more questions, our Facebook page is open for any questions. Okay. So, Again, salamat po sa mga gumamit ng hashtag namin. Kung meron pa kayong bagong insights, gusto nyo pa po mag-share ng inyong mga learnings sa webinar series na ito, we encourage you to use the hashtag Education Continuity Plan PH at hashtag Isulong Edukasyon. And yes, I'm sure everyone is very excited for the main event. I'm sure kanina pa kayo naghihintay. So, now I am excited to introduce our speaker for today. She is very well respected in the educational technology scene in the Philippines, and it is our privilege that she accepted our invitation for today. She considers herself as a lifelong learner and a perennial wanderer. She loves observing people's culture during her travels to different parts of the world. She prefers using these observations as tools to deepen appreciation of various international and local cultures. Because of this, she took her undergraduate course in the University of the Philippines, Manila, with a degree in Social Sciences Area Studies and a master's degree in Asian Studies at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. She was also fortunate to be given a fellowship grant at the Sogang University, South Korea, where she studied Korean language, culture, and society. Her love for Korea made her curious about technology as an enabler of skills and knowledge, which should be translated as a humanizer of action. Currently, she is a certified, a Microsoft Certified Educator, Microsoft Innovative Educator Fellow, Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert, Microsoft Philippines Education Ambassador, an Apple Distinguished Educator, as well as a Google Certified Educator Level 1 and 2, as well as a trainer. She has given numerous talks, seminars, and workshops on the use of technology in aid of learning locally and internationally. Currently, she serves at the De La Salle, Santiago Zobel as an education technology mentor, as well as a junior and senior high school faculty. She was a former education technology coordinator of the said institution. She likes watching YouTube vlogs, Korean novellas on Netflix, and play Heyday and Merge Dragon on her iPad. Hopefully, she can curate her content online for social studies and edtech very soon. Yes, ma'am, aabangan po namin yan. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Miss Emie Baylon.
Right. It's a delight to be with you this afternoon. Right. I know it is quite a holy hour today. Alam kong panahon ng pagtulog, right? Antukin lahat ng mga tao these days, especially kapag hapon. Kaya I really appreciate everybody making time for today's discussion. I hope that you're able to see my presentation. Right. So are we good? Yeah. So my job for today, again, is to provide you an insight on how we could be able to phrase an appropriate pedagogical framework for remote learning. Again, I don't want to say too much. Mikay already mentioned a lot of things about me, but again, just to give you a brief, I'm like you. I ride the same boat that you're riding. I am a teacher. I like teaching. I like wandering. Para kung Dora the Explorer, di ba? Nasa mukha ko pa lang, di ba? Parang Dora the Explorer. But more importantly, I had experience with how we could be able to integrate technology in aid of learning, and I will be riding it with you. Let's try. I'm going to share with you whatever I learned from the time being that I'm integrating technology, and hopefully we could be able to learn from each other's experience as we embark this new journey to remote learning. So what are we going to learn today? So I'm sure a lot of people are curious of what are we going to learn today. So for today, I will be discussing considerable pedagogy that will be used in remote learning. And other things that I'm going to be sharing with you for the entire presentation would be 10 tips of how you're going to be able to establish a good workflow when you do remote learning. Again, my context, I'd like to establish first my context. First, I am a faculty both from the junior and the senior high school. Hence, my context is the basic education. But there are certain things that will be very much applicable to the higher educational institution. I hope that some pedagogical sharing that I'm going to be imparting today may be applicable also to higher educational institutions and in a way would be able to enlighten them as they embark remote learning. So that those are my objectives for today. I'd like to open up this discussion first by putting us all in an insight of what kind of an environment are we establishing if our children are going to embark net are going to embark remote learning. So here's a story from Inside Story. I'd like you to observe how the kids and the mom would interact with each other as they together embark the new normal.
It's how to learn in the age of the coronavirus crisis. Emma, Alicia, and Benjamin Gerardo are all hard at work attending school remotely from their dining room table.
Right now we're on the Ancient Egypt kind of section. I'm working on English homework right now.
Mom Grace is forced to work from home as well, so she can keep an eye on her kids. This is a sign of the times as schools shut down around the country. Here in Seattle, the school district has ordered 23,500 students to stay home.
For the most part, they're okay, but we run into little issues where someone's talking along with their work and other people are trying to concentrate.
The kids are using the video conferencing tool Zoom, which allows instructors to teach multiple students at one time.
This is C sharp.
This is how 13-year-old Emma is attending choir. Practicing out loud is hitting a sour note with her siblings.
Okay, shut your mouth.
I'm watching the world's most boring video right now, and I need to be able to focus on it, and that's distracting me.
27 times.
Another issue, turns out 12-year-old Ben talks a lot when he does math.
346, I think it was. You can stop now.
That annoys his sisters. Their new schedule is also an adjustment.
Oh my god, what?
Alicia just realized she missed her Spanish class.
A Zoom meeting this was to happen an hour ago. Whoops.
So what grade do these kids give their new remote school?
I would give it a B, maybe a B plus.
That's a video coming from Inside Edition in the States. A lot of people in the United States started venturing into a transition to a rapid remote learning, again, because suddenly their schedule got disrupted because of the declaration of a lockdown in different parts of the United States of America. Hence, even you've seen in the video different issues of how we're going to embark on remote learning. Why am I presenting this idea to you? Because again, when we do remote learning, I'm sure the previous speaker yesterday was able to establish that when we embark on education technology plan, it's not only about the teachers and the students alone, or even the administration alone. It's always about establishing also the kind of learning environment where the teachers, administrators, and students would be able to really provide a good learning space and a good teacher-learning interaction for everybody. And how are we going to be able to do that? There's supposed to be a great method, a great pedagogical method, which should be able to be implemented, which is supposed to be standardized for all, so that not only the teachers and the administrators should be able to understand it, even the students and the parents should be able to understand that, so that the kind of learning environment we wish to design would be well translated in the kind of learning goal we wish to embark into. And that's what I wanted to share today. When we Remember, when we integrate technology, it's not just because we are in a rapid transition, we'll just use sporadic, arbitrary, student-centered technology use. When we interact with technology, when we integrate with technology, technology integration is supposed to be, one, it's routine-based, it has a plan, it has a purpose, which would enable students to engage with content and would enable them also to build and analyze the content that you're presenting to them, allowing both the instructor and the student to utilize technology so that not only interaction can happen, there are a lot of learning environments can happen so that meaningful learning spaces can be established. That's the kind of technology integration we wanted to achieve when we do remote learning. And again, if we're going to refer to our own basic education, to our own Department of Education, they were able to propose various modes of teaching, learning, delivery. I got this from our Department of Education PH website. They were proposing face-to-face. They were proposing, again, if there is a possibility for these children to be able to go to school with an observance of the social distancing, which is referred by the IATF. I'm sure these are one of the options that people can look into. Again, there's also blended learning. There's also remote learning. Again, the utilization of technology, apprenticeship. Here is particularly for the senior high school. They're presenting an idea wherein there is supposed to be a mentorship between those kids who are doing the higher level senior high school, so that they could be able to be guided by practitioners, industry practitioners, so that they could be able to get more insights about the strand that they belong to. And at the same time, open distance learning. Open distance learning, or the utilization of full-blown virtual learning, wherein we refer to various resources, various internet resources for students to be able to continue learning. Again, what triggered the proposal of all these modes of teaching, learning, delivery? These are all triggered by the following reasons. One, because we still wanted to continue learning with the idea of flexibility and shared responsibility between the instructor and the learner. That the teacher is not supposed to be the only one giving content, that in a sense there's supposed to be collaboration with the student consuming the content that the teachers are giving them. And at the same time, there's also some sort of a Socratic method wherein students can inquire, even virtually, for the content that they're engaged with. Number two would be the access to technology and information. The access to technology and information would allow them to be able not only to, particularly those people in the urbanized areas, those people have access to technology, can still be given an option to continue learning and provide information to those children who have the resources. And again, to those who do not have the resources, may also be given other options for them to continue the teaching learning process. And lastly, another trigger for these designs proposed by the Department of Education is again the various mode of assessment and continuity of learning. That despite the fact that there is some sort of a distance and space between the instructor and the student, there's supposed to be a manner of how teachers can still maintain that level of assessment and continuity of learning despite all these separation. And because of this pandemic, again, there's a lot of buzzing pedagogies that had been triggered. And all these buzzing pedagogies have been taught to everybody. These are all familiar words and familiar stuff to everybody. It's just that I feel as an edtech practitioner, because we've been very, very much comforted of the fact that we are not really pressured to utilize all these things, or maybe because it didn't become that kind of a need for everybody, because we're so comfortable using this teaching modes and methods. That's why it did not become a full-blown problem. And now that the pandemic came in, a lot of webinars these days, notice that there's a lot of webinars these days emphasizing on these buzzing pedagogies, which I feel should have been already been given to us in a way as part of our professional development program for faculty. And here are the following things that has been that has been buzzing for quite some time. Number one, blended learning. I'll dig deeper into this when you talk of blended learning in a bit. Number two, there's also a need for collaboration in building knowledge. These days, when you utilize the internet, when you utilize open resources, there's a lot of resources out there. You go to YouTube, I'm sure your kids would easily be exposed to a lot of information. But the reality is, are these information all valid? Are these information all credible? Are these information all reliable? And we as teachers should be able to also serve as a guide for these children to be more vigilant in having that skill to be able to know which is credible and what is credible news, what's fake news, and what's not. So these are things that we need to be able to emphasize also when we embark into remote learning. Another thing is the utilization of media, multimedia, and open education resources. A lot of things these days when you go online are easily accessible. These days, even Ivy League schools are already opening their resources. There are a lot of massive open online resources these days, which can enable you to learn anything, anytime, anywhere. And if you pay a little bit, you can get a certain certificate for it. There are a lot of resources. Let's say you Google anything, you can easily access a resource. But again, in relation to number two, even all these things would matter. Again, the reliability of the resource, the credibility of resource, again, would matter. Another thing that I think would be an issue on this pedagogical resource would be, one, we Filipinos, we love copy pasting. We love borrowing resources from other people and just merely putting in our own resource without necessarily acknowledging the owner of that specific let's say media or specific content that we're into. That's why even the utilization of media can also put that into hot waters. Like example, these days the idea of copyright infringement will already be there. The idea of plagiarism would still be there, or even the idea of data privacy. If we're not aware of all these things, definitely we can't compromise ourselves and even the idea that we are consuming. Fourth, another buzzing pedagogy that's very much around when we talk about utilization of technology in a remote setup, even which was highlighted again during the pandemic, was the increase of student control, the increase of choice, the increase of independence. Given the idea that specifically in the basic education, are we ready to give a little bit of are we ready to give freedom to our children to learn on their own? Especially those kids in the grade school, especially kids who are already there in the primary school. Are we ready to really give them the freedom of learning things on their own? What kind or how much freedom are we willing to give up for these kids? A while ago, you saw a video. You've seen 3 children. One is in the middle school, 2 are in the high school. How much freedom are we willing to give up for these children to be able to really work? What kind of responsibility should we share with the parents so that we could be able to maintain that certain level of reliability that these children are really doing work at home? So those are ideas that I think we should be talking about as we embark remote learning. Fifth, anytime, anywhere, any size learning. Is there a one size fits all thing when we talk about remote learning? Or Is it about creating different learning paths that would address not only multiple intelligences, but it should address also varying learning capacities of the students that we're handling. So in remote learning, it's not necessarily that we give one task, everything is okay. When we do remote learning, it's important also that we realize that there are a lot of students under our care, and what kind of learning paths are we going to give them so that we could be able to really ensure that they're really learning the right thing. Fifth would be new forms of assessment. That's one thing also that we teachers are really scared of when we talk about learning remotely. I was having a conversation recently with my cousin who is in the United States, and one thing that her daughter told her about remote learning is about cheating. And we as teachers, again, real as not, we have also that apprehension when we talk about assessments. And definitely, assessing kids remotely might also be a problem to us. How sure are we that really the kids under our care are the ones doing the work, not the adults who are supervising them, or even not their parents themselves? How sure are we that these kids are not cheating? How sure are we that these kids are not passing on the shots, the screenshots of the quiz that we did to other classmates from other sections so that they could be able to really ensure that they will be getting a passing mark? Those are things that we could be able to look into, because again, part of curriculum is assessing. And we all know for a fact that our assessment here in the Philippines is really geared towards face-to-face learning. There's really a direct contact when we make them take assessments. There's really a direct contact between the student and the teacher supervising the assessment. And yet now that we are in the pandemic crisis, are we even ready to shift the way we assess in a remote setup so that again we can maintain ensuring that the kids, that our students are getting the right competence when they walk the path of the grade or the level that they're into? Second to the last would be self-directed and non-formal online teaching. Another issue of doing remote learning again is how much time am I going to design my lesson? Am I supposed to be giving a lecture for my students for 1 hour and make them listen to me for 1 hour? How long should I consider my students sitting in front of the computer? And how am I sure that the students are really listening to my lecture? Another issue would be, am I going to be turning myself into a vlogger for me to be able to really conduct myself as a teacher in remote setup? Am I just curating my materials from some resources, put them all together, arrange them meaningfully so that I can just put it in a learning management system and make them read it on their own? Again, why are these issues? Why are these buzzing pedagogies? Because in a remote setup, let's be real, as you saw it in the video, parents would always be there. Parents will always be present in this situation. And parents, whether we like it or not, would always be asking that we teachers are the ones teaching their children, right? And if they're the ones teaching their children, might as well enroll their children into a homeschool program, when it would be a reality now that they will be the one teaching their kids because of the homeschool program. But again, how do we really resolve that idea that we are the ones teaching the kids? How are we going to be able to really draw the line between the right amount of curation and the right amount of creation? And how do we also establish that idea that we are the ones teaching the kids without necessarily bringing them to a certain amount of boredom? Again, we don't teach them to bore. We teach them to learn, and at the same time to reach a certain level of interest and fun. even if there's a certain distance that you are into. And lastly, the more important thing is for me, which is I'm very passionate of. Most people were all focused on the teaching learning process. Well, in fact and in truth, there's a lot of things that we need to look into netiquette, particularly in establishing digital citizenship. In remote setup, let's be real, there's a lot of issues that might be happening not only between um, teachers themselves, but even to students themselves. In the idea of netiquette, we need to be able to also establish the way we're going to be able to communicate to our students. As educators, we need to be able to really set that certain formality to be able to ensure that we are still talking to the students as their teacher. That's number one. We need to be able to establish also the way that the students would feel that they're still safe and secure in their environment, in their school, in their virtual classroom, in the chats that you're going to let them get into, in the gaming applications that they're going to utilize, or even in the activities that you're going to make them do. You need to be able to make them feel that all these things is not just about learning, but at least making them feel that each of them has a responsibility to each other. The kind of value that we convey would also be something that we need to look into when we do our lessons remotely. Another thing is when they consume social media, when we even consume social media ourselves, that we need to be able to model the kind of belief that our students would wanted that we wanted our students to look into, that our students would want to be, not only after they take your course or even after. We need to be able to really walk the talk that your students wanted to observe in your class. So it's important also that when you talk about remote learning, there's supposed to be underlying policies, not only in the utilization of your virtual learning applications, platforms, or even the tools that you're going to look into. There is supposed to be guidelines on how to be able to present themselves online. There's supposed to be a guideline for them on how to be able to talk when they're online. There's supposed to be a guideline for them on how to be able to write letters when they're conversing rather with their peers or with their parents or even with their teachers. There's supposed to be a way of how to be able to handle themselves on social media. And I think these are things that we need to look into. As educators, it's not only about how we can redesign curriculum. It's not only about how we can restructure curriculum so that it could target access, it could target continuity of learning, it could target flexibility, but at least it could target again the kind of vision, mission, and core value that the institution you belong to would be pushing for. Do not forget that every institution would have the core values that you wanted to push for your students. And you wanted them that as they go up the ladder of their education in your tutelage, they would be able to get certain core values to live on. And that can be emphasized through netiquette and digital citizenship. Let me go through. When we talk of blended learning, for me, when we talk of blended learning, there are three things that we need to look into. We need to really consider every time we talk about blended learning. For me, blended learning is obviously the combination of e-learning and brick and mortar face-to-face learning. But again, when you talk blended learning, there's supposed to be a purpose. When you implement blended learning, it's not just because, let's say, I wanted to be able to make my students active in class. I wanted them to play games. Again, why do you make them play games? Again, the most important thing is you got to be able to put an anchorage. You have to be able to give reasoning on why are you using that certain platform. There's a purpose to it. Pedagogy is above technology and not the other way around. I'm using gamification because, one, I wanted my students to be active in my class, and at the same time, I will utilize the data that I will be generating from that game for me to be able to easily explain to them the mistake that they got from that specific topic so that they won't repeat those mistakes again. Something to that effect. So again, there's purpose to blended learning. Whatever tool you're going to use, whatever virtual classroom you're going to utilize, whatever applications or program that you're going to get into, there is a certain purpose to it. When we talk of blended learning, again, you need to consider the kind of place that you wanted to establish for your students and you as a teacher to experience as you go through the teaching learning process. Effective technology integration in a blended learning setup should create meaningful learning environments. What are these meaningful learning environments? Later, I'll introduce them to you. And lastly, when we talk of blended learning is supposed to be considering pacing. Again, it's supposed to be creating not only one single path for everybody to track on, but again, it's supposed to be able to set the pace on how students could learn inside the classroom using different learning paths that would address the different learning styles of your students. So that's blended learning for today. Now, and how could we be able to establish different learning paths for students? There are certain ways on how to be able to do that. We can do it on a remote setup, again, either through synchronous learning or asynchronous learning. Allow me to just embark on this quickly. When we talk of synchronous learning, again, similar to what we're doing right now, synchronous learning is just a live instruction with a teacher. We're doing it together. It can either be a lecture, it can either be a simple activity, it can be a consultation. The idea of learning is linear. The teacher gives something, the students receive it, they give it right away, and feedback can easily be given right away by the teacher. And there's a fixed schedule dependent on the instructor's availability and prescribed schedule. So let's example, if you remember it a while ago in the video that we previously watched, the girl forgot her class. She missed it. It was an hour ago. It's supposed to be a synchronous class, but because she forgot about it, she missed that class. And again, that's synchronous learning. There's specific schedule that you need to maintain for students to really be able to attend the class. And how would you be able to do the attendance? Again, we use technology tools where students and teachers meet. It could either be through the utilization of learning management system, through a utilization of a group chat tool, or even a video conference tool. Again, to establish that idea that the teacher and the students would be able to have a linear interaction with each other. That's synchronous learning. Asynchronous, on the other hand, it's the students allowing themselves to learn on their own independently with less or even no direct instruction from the instructor themselves. So the instructor should be able to give clear directions on how the students will be able to do the tool. It can be placed in a learning management system or a video interactivity tool or a blended learning tool that they're supposed to use. They're going to be able to do it in a free format, meaning student-centered with less supervision. The only supervision that they're going to have perhaps would be the guidance of the parents, reminders from the parents, and they're doing it on their own. They're doing it. It can either be done individually or in groups depending on the assigned task given by the teacher. The schedule for it is open. It's given in a longer period of time compared to synchronous learning, again, because there's delayed feedback, and at the same time, the work is self-pacing. Because again, we anticipate the fact that there is quite difficult, there's a level of difficulty. It could be a higher or addressing higher order thinking skill when you assign asynchronous learning to your students. You're giving them a challenge work so that you could be able to check if they're able to indeed get something that you discussed either in your synchronous class meeting with them. So that's the difference. That's one way for you to be able to establish pacing in either blended learning or in a remote setup. when we integrate technology, it's important also that we understand purpose. We understand, why do we really utilize technology? Is it only about it being required by your institution, or it is because it will definitely change the way you work, it would enhance the way you deliver your work, and it can even transform the way you perform your work? That's why it's important, we need to be very aware of one important theory which would enable us to understand integration of technology, which is proposed by, again, Dr. Ruben Puentedura, which is called the SAMR model. SAMR is a way of explaining how technology can enhance the way we deliver work in a remote setup, or how we can transform the way we deliver work in a remote setup. Let me dig deeper into it one by one. When we talk about substitution, it's just a mere substituting of direct substitution of how we do it on paper. There's no functional change, but it's a direct substitute of how we do paper. Let's say the usual pen and pen quiz, we make the students transform it into a Word file, or better yet, we make them transform it into a PDF. Again, why there's no functional change? Because one by one, the students would still submit those paper, and one by one, you still check those paperwork that they're going to turn into you. Despite the fact that what's the change that happened? One, the change that happened here was you're able to augment the way of helping the environment, right? There's no more paper. You lessen the paper that you're going to check. There's no physical paper to check. But at the end of the day, you still check one by one paper, because again, you just made it paperless. But still, you're still checking the same amount of paper in that specific exercise. So that's substitution. You merely substituted your paper into another form, which is in this case a Word file or PDF. How do you make it into something more useful, something that would change the way you teach? What's the functional change that you wanted to ask? Let's say, example, in my case, I don't like checking one by one. I want to be able to get the results of everybody for that specific quiz one by for the entire class, and at the same time provide me feedback of what's the grade of each student about that quiz. So how do we do that? Augmentation. The technology here acts as a direct substitute with no functional improvement still. Again, it's still the same, serving the same purpose as the ones in substitution. It's still augmenting the fact that you don't hold papers anymore, paperless. How do you do that? Let's say in reality, how do I make my PDF paper into an augmented paper, or on an augmentation level for the SAMR model? I turn it into a form, a Google form. So when I turn it into a Google form, that 10-point quiz that you normally send to your students, the students would just have to tick all the answers. Right after, once they turn in the answer, they could be able to give me the paper, or the form can provide me a feedback of the grade of that specific student, and at the same time, the feedback of how the entire class performed for every question that they're able to encounter. And I'm going to be, with that alone, I could be able to present it to them, so that I could be able to right away to address what are those mistakes that they were able to commit in that specific quiz. So augmentation, there's already a certain change, improvement with the way you utilize your technology, but again, paperless. So there's enhancement with the utilization of technology. There is lessening of the number of paper that you are utilizing in your classroom, and at the same time, you're allowing your students to again explore technology in another level in your classroom. How can we bring it into a transformation format? How do we level it up? Modification. Of course, every teacher would want their students to give you the right answer for every quiz. And you want your students to be able to ensure that they're giving you the right thing for every question that you're presenting to them. How do you do that? Let's say the same office form that you presented to them. For you to be able to make it more higher order thinking, you can change the question into forms like there's a picture analysis, you insert a picture on the form, and then they tell you stories about it, or you can insert a video from that form, and then they give you analysis on it, or you can utilize audio, you can make them listen to something, and then they can provide you certain feedback. Through modification, again, through the utilization of different media, you are able to target now higher order thinking skills. That same form that you utilize in augmentation, when you integrate different forms of media, you are able now to bring your kids from lower order thinking to higher order thinking skills. Because again, in higher order thinking skills, you allow them to analyze, you allow them to evaluate, and even create for that matter. So that's modification. Again, it's still with the utilization of technology, but there is a significant task redesign to it. How do we bring it to a level of redefinition? How do we bring it into a level wherein these tasks before, it's not conceivable, it's unimaginable, but yet with technology, you're able to do it. Example, before, when we do quizzes, even if we wanted to share that quiz to our colleague, you still need to write it to a notebook. And it would take time for you to write all those quizzes, quiz numbers, quiz item in a notebook, right? Or on a paper, right? So for you to be able to share it to your colleague, you send the paper to them, and then they copy that paper, and then they return that paper back to you, which takes a lot of time. Before, we never conceived that idea, that simple quiz, that a simple form can easily be shared to another person, and you two can collaborate in working on that specific form. So that's redefinition. You're now allowing a creation of a new task. Before, that's not even imaginable. Before, collaboration using technology is not even possible. Again, because there's certain reasons enabling people not to be separating people from such. But with technology at hand, a lot of people can easily be able to do tasks in a breeze because of the usage of technology. So, and not only that, each of you could easily and efficiently get data which you can present to your management, to your coordinators, to really define, to really showcase the amount of learning that your students are getting for the specific topic that you're presenting to them. That's the SAMR model. It's another pedagogy. Why am I presenting again? I'm sure it's in one way or another, you're able to hear something about the SAMR model, and yet perhaps we need to be able to really capture how exactly SAMR model would be very relevant in the way we design our lessons, so that we could be able to figure it out how technology could not only be of help to your students, but to be of help to you. As I mentioned in the beginning, technology is not only about helping your students, it's also about helping you as a teacher. So these are examples. If you're teaching a kid, other examples perhaps. So if you're into literature, these are ways on how to be able to elevate your technology use from substitution, augmentation, all the way to redefinition. This is what I'm saying a while ago. When we talk about technology integration, blended learning, it's essential that we establish meaningful learning environments where students would really be able to not only enhance their collaborative experiences with each other, but again, bring about lower order thinking and higher order thinking skills from your students. And how do you do that? It's important that we establish good and meaningful learning environment. Where did I get this learning environment? This is taken from, this is a document given by the Florida Center of Instructional Technology. They have this tool that would really check on how we will be able to create meaningful learning environments with the utilization of technology. What are these learning environments that I'm talking about? First, it's good that we establish active learning environment. In an active learning environment, students are given the chance to get engaged with the content that you're giving. Students are provided that various ways on how to be able to look into content that their interests and at the same time their delight for learning would be motivated in that interaction with them. So example, how do you do active learning? You can provide them games. You could provide them survey, polling, or even simple the asking of questions. You can make them into a word, let's say a word cloud. So you're asking them how they feel, and at the same time you're also giving them an opportunity to provide feedback on how much are they able to learn from the content, specifically when you do synchronous learning with them. Another way of establishing learning environment is to provide avenues for collaboration. Remember, no man is an island. It's a skill of the 21st century. It's not only a skill for teachers, it's also a skill for students. When you provide collaboration in your classroom or even in your remote setup, a lot of avenues for students are opened up. You provide them avenues to create, you provide them avenues to be more proactive with each other. You also provide them avenues to establish more sensitivity and empathy towards each other. With constructive, you allow them to build knowledge on the content that you're presenting to them. Again, in constructive learning environment, you got to provide several avenues for students not to become parents. Remember, you are building human in this class, in the classroom that is entrusted to you. Hence, you're supposed to allow these children in the long run to be able to express things in their own ideas, in their own words. Because again, if they're just repeating whatever you are teaching them, if you're just merely making them memorize the work, again, it's not bringing them to higher order learning. It's all about, again, providing them avenues to be able to interpret things, their idea, their way. Fourth level is authentic. When we talk about authentic level, it's utilizing what they learn from collaborative, constructive, by applying it to resolve real life problems that they're confronted with in their community or in their immediate reality. So whatever they're faced with in their classes, it's a good opportunity for them to be able to really understand and check if whatever they're learning in your class would be something relevant to what's happening around their society or outside the real world. Last but definitely not least is goal-directed. When we talk of goal-directed, it's them owning the learning. You provide them an opportunity for them to systematize the amount of learning that they're able to do in that specific time that you're with them. You provide them an opportunity for them to provide you pieces of evidence that they indeed were able to do learning with you, and at the same time they own the learning that they experience for the time being that they were able to, that they were in your tutelage. So that's the learning environment that we need to remember when we talk about blended learning or even remote learning for that matter. Here's an example of how we can do active collaborative learning in your class. I conduct training sessions with my teachers, with the social studies faculty in De La Salle Zobel. Whenever I do whenever I check or I wanted to do active learning with them, I normally check on what they feel. So I give them this, I have this app called Paul Everywhere. In Paul Everywhere, there is a feeling part there that they just have to check, notice that they could be able to put whatever they feel, press it there, pin it there, so that I could be able to elicit where they are and have that use that barometer in establishing the kind of class that I wanted to create in their synchronous class. Another way of establishing an active learning would be through gaming. Whenever I wanted to check if they are really getting what they're supposed to get during my lecture, I give them a quiz. I use an app called Quizzes, and again, these are teachers. Even teachers are happy whenever they do gaming inside in a synchronous class, and it would really change the mood of people. It could maintain the mood of people whenever you utilize game inside your classroom. In synchronous learning, again, we utilize video conferencing for you to really check how people feel. Whenever you do remote learning, you provide an avenue for each other to create video exchange, communication, for you to check if they're able to get what you're conveying to them. So these are various ways of utilizing technology and establishing different learning environments. I'd like to zero in on this part, particularly whenever I do learning, I don't just focus on the data that I generate. Right after playing, I normally go to the questions one by one and explain to my students why exactly were they wrong or what went wrong in each item, so that again, when they take the same quiz or when they encounter the same content in the future, they don't commit that mistake. I think that's also one thing that we need to remember as teachers. When we utilize technology in the class, it's not only about establishing fun, maintaining that barometer of fun inside the classroom, but also maintaining that barometer of knowledge inside your classroom. So that again, while you're having fun, you're emphasizing to your students that you don't want them to commit the previous mistake that they were able to encounter. Another way that I do for students to be able to establish like authenticity in learning or even construction in learning is through the utilization of AR VR. Like in this case, I have this thing called Merge Cube. It's again a group. You can, for those people who are using Office 365, you can utilize Merge Cube. Merge Cube is a good app that can allow you to bring your students in example museum, like in this case the British Museum. I was able to make them explore the collection of the British Museum, and through that Merge Cube, if you see this cube a while ago at the left side rather, I'm able to bring my students into a place I'm sure will be very difficult for them to visit, especially in this time of a pandemic, when everybody is restricted to travel. Now, with the utilization of Merge Cube, I'm able to bring up to them an opportunity for them to do virtual tour rather, and virtual tour can be done through this app and other apps. Skype can facilitate virtual tour, or even there are a lot of videos these days that are curated or made by travel vloggers, which I think can be a good way for you to be able to bring your kids for virtual tours, which again, in times like pandemic, it's a good way for you to be able to really make them feel that there's something to look forward to during or right after we experience this pandemic. So one way for you to be able to create construction in your class or create collaboration in your class is through, again, I highly recommend Merge Cube in in this manner for establishing of deeper learning, construction, and authenticity of learning. At this point, when we do remote learning, there are 5 important skills that I'd like you to emphasize. You, I'd like every teacher to have a skill of when we do remote learning. Because again, by having these skills, we are going to be able to know how we can translate the information that we're doing, the information that we are presenting during our class in a remote setup. So what are these 5 skills that I'm going to present to you now? So one, there's video creation, there's hosting, interactivity, learning management system, and hardware. Allow me to dig deeper into each skill one by one. When we talk of video creation, it looks into screencasting and video conferencing. When we talk about hosting, it talks about where you place your videos or where you place your data to ensure that it's going to be very secure and easily accessible to the students that's going to be consuming your data. Where for interactive videos, you need to be able to ensure that your students are indeed watching your films. Your students are indeed consuming your videos, that they're really doing something about your videos. You need to also be very sensitive of your learning management system as your depository of your curated and created content, and at the same time, how you deliver your data, and how are you going to be able to communicate with your students, and lastly, what kind of a hardware will you be using. When we talk of video creation looks into how you're going to turn your simple presentation material into something very useful on remote learning. In this case, how can you change your video into how can you change your PowerPoint rather, or your presentation file into a video? That's I think one of the wonders of the new PowerPoint these days. One thing that I like personally, that now your PowerPoint can now be changed or can be converted into a video, which you can export and right away put into your learning management system. Let's say put it into your stream, and then you put it into your teams, so that your students can easily access your data, easily access your lecture material. So for those of you who are using Microsoft Windows, particularly those of you using Microsoft PowerPoint, particularly those people using the Office 365 account, you can activate your PowerPoint recorder in your PowerPoint, so that you can export your PowerPoint with your voice being recorded there, so that again you can generate it, put it either in stream or in your Microsoft Teams, and allow your students to easily utilize it, particularly for their asynchronous learning. For those of you who are using the other softwares for that matter, you can also look into other applications for you to be able to do screencasting. Like example, you can do QuickTime Player, or you can utilize A2 Catcher. Xbox has a way for you to capture your desktop and screencast-o-matic. For this case, for those people who are doing video demonstration, again, for those of you who wanted to make your students create demonstration, because again, demonstration is also a way for them to demonstrate higher order thinking, especially for those of you teaching, let's say, speech classes or communication classes. Flipgrid is a good way for you to make your students record their video. It's a safe ground. Students can record a 1 to 2 minute video, and then there they could demonstrate their thoughts. They can answer vocally. In Flipgrid also, they can also provide simulated social media materials, which could allow you also to simulate, example, IG stories, or even photos that are edited. So you can even put icons or even emojis in Flipgrid, which for me is another way of making your students engage with the content that you're presenting to them, which can also be captured in videos. Flipgrid is a recommended app for video for videos, for making videos, generation of videos. Teams would be a highly recommended app, again, for managing your class. Because of the power of integrating Office 365 in Teams, your class can easily access, let's say, the PowerPoint that you created, the Word documents that you're able to generate in your class, or even, let's say, if you have a class notebook through OneNote, you can even integrate that through Teams. You can already, through Teams, conduct your video conferencing with them, which, again, would facilitate your work easily. That's video creation. When we talk about hosting and video interactivity, we talk about where you're going to place all these videos or all these files that you created for them. You can, and all these files should be placed in an area where students can easily access them. The data of the students will not be compromised, and at the same time, these hosting sites are cloud-based, which would enable you and the students to easily get it, and the students would definitely have an access to it right away just by merely clicking a link. So, example, in the case of those of you using Microsoft 365, you can put it in your OneDrive. One thing I love about OneDrive is that when I place my files on OneDrive, even if I'm using my Mac, I made it into my Windows 10 computer. It's easy for me to access that file without necessarily worrying where did I place the file. And all the changes that I made, whether it's in the Mac or whether it's in the Windows computer, it can easily be integrated in that specific file because I saved it in OneDrive, and I can access it anytime, anywhere. So OneDrive is one great tool that you can explore on, which is again part of the 365 family, for you to be able to enjoy the power of cloud, especially for hosting. Not only videos, but all the created files that you created for the purpose of your remote class. For those of you using Mac, again, iCloud is a resort, another way for you to be able to look into for remote learning. Again, there are other cloud-based apps that we can explore on. There's Google Drive, there's Dropbox. A lot of these are cloud-based, again, for you to be able to ensure that these files can easily be accessed anytime, anywhere. On the idea of video interactivity, one thing that we have to ensure when we make videos is that our students are really watching the videos. And there are supposed to be proofs and pieces of evidence that can be given to us that indeed your children, indeed the students, watch the video that we placed in the learning management system that we are using. So in my case, I am proposing, or whenever I make a video, I put it into an app called Edpuzzle or PlayPause, because Edpuzzle and PlayPause can provide me a feedback if my students were able to really watch the video well. In Edpuzzle, the students are provided questions while they're watching the video. If they didn't answer the video will not move on. They need to be able to provide an answer first before they could be able to proceed watching the video. Once the video stops, they answer the question, and once they give an answer, the video proceeds. Once they're done watching the video, Edpuzzle provides me now a feedback of how the students are able to understand the video that I'm able to give them. I'm not giving them, they can repeat the video that they're watching. The Edpuzzle can still provide me how many times did the student of mine watch the video, and how, at what attempt are they able to get the higher answer that they're able to consume for that video. I'm not after the grade. When I do Ed Puzzle, it's very formative for me because I'm sure they're able to get it within the video. But what's important to me is that through Ed Puzzle, I'm able to get that piece of evidence that indeed my students are really watching the video that I made for them. So let me go back. These are the comparison. This table would be some sort of a comparison of the difference between Ed Puzzle and Play Posit, and what difference can I get from each application. When I teach junior high school, I normally give Ed Puzzle because again, these are the number of normally the range of questions that I would give the junior high school would be more fit to Ed Puzzle. When they go the higher level, the senior high school, I normally utilize Play Posit. So that's a difference. Let me move on to the next. Here's learning management system. When we talk of learning management system, again, it's an online or software system, which is very important in the utilization of planning, executing, and assessing of specific tools. It should rather aid in administration, documentation, and tracking and recording of whatever activity that you're able to do in your class. So in this case, it's essential also that when you consider an LMS, you're supposed to be able to consider 10 things. That you're supposed to be able to avoid unwanted feature, that they're supposed to be able to integrate, and there's supposed to be a customer support. There's content quality that can be offered by that specific LMS. Price is very reasonable. There are no hidden costs for it. There's supposed to be a mobile support because again, with remote learning, we got to be very inclusive that there are other kids whose technology resource would be a mobile phone alone. So there's supposed to be a mobile support for it, and it's supposed to provide you a roadmap that would enable you, that would be in line with whatever technology plan that your school is embarking into. It's supposed to be scalable, reliable, and secure. Again, with an implementation time frame, which for me, I think can be supported by both Microsoft and Nuadu. Nuadu, as we all know, is an online learning solution integrated with Microsoft Teams. It is a learning platform that allows educators to assign and share digital resources and content for assessment. It's equipped with different systems to diagnose, analyze students' strengths and weaknesses. It provides also remediation in a differentiated or a personalized learning style. Those people, particularly using Nuadu as a learning platform in school, can now learn outside the classroom through the Nuadu Learning app. Complementing with the Nuadu web format or platform, it is also used as a school learning center. It can also be utilized as a school learning center. The app can allow you to view and complete assigned tasks using a smartphone. It can also be a good way. Nuadu can also be providing you a lot of good feedback and interactive resources that can help you enhance your performance. Again, it addresses the need now for assessment, and assessment is not only about to provide skill-based learning. Assessment is now providing you ways on how to be able to ensure and predict how far would students be working on for them to be able to achieve the grades that they wanted to achieve. So, example, what are the key benefits that Nuadu can offer to us? So let's say if Nuadu can allow you to access lessons and assignment anytime, anywhere. It could allow you to complete your homework, your exercises, or your tests assigned by the teacher. It could also allow the students to review for exams for self-assigned questions for specific or selected subject. So again, it can also provide real-time feedback. It could allow students to check answers and see scores instantly, and it can allow students to track their progress for each subject and with each type of an activity, which again should also be very, we also have to be very mindful when we choose an LMS. It has to also contain content support which are very aligned to whatever is prescribed by the Department of Education. In this case, with the support of the St. Augustine Publication Incorporated, the partnership with Nuwadu is established. Hence, there is a partnership that they have, and if you buy 5 bundled book titles for from St. Augustine Publication, I guess. Yes, St. Augustine Publication. There is a free Nuwadu setup that's going to be given to you for no extra cost. And again, because they wanted to ensure that learning content would definitely be aligned with whatever is prescribed by the Department of Education, a partnership between St. Augustine Publication and Nuwadu is established. So there. So alongside, there's a partnership with Microsoft for implementation of Office 365. So Nuwadu has an established partnership with Microsoft. With that alone, remote learning would definitely be a breeze for everybody. My last slide. When we talk of remote learning, there are 10 things that I wanted you to look into. Again, it's not to make your life easy, but at least to give you more security when you do remote learning. Again, the idea of remote learning is, of course, to embrace the new normal, but ensuring that there's safe and secure environment that you're establishing, not only amongst your students, but even with your colleagues as well. Allow me to dig deeper into each slide or in each topic. One, when you plan your lesson, it's good that you have that check. It's good that you make another person check your work. It's good that you can ask your colleagues to look at it, or even your coordinator to look at it. Again, it's good to have two eyes looking into your lesson. Because again, no man is an island. It's good that collaboration is also being observed when we develop a lesson for online learning or for remote learning, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous. Another one, when you make your video, after you plan your lesson, of course, definitely you'll make your video, write scripts. Believe it or not, when you make videos, your students will not last if you make it 30 minutes or longer. It would only be if your class is an hour or even 40 minutes for that matter, the attention of your students is just 1/3 of your usual attendance or your usual class hours in remote learning. So in my case, it's an hour. I normally put my videos on a 10 to 15 minute margin. Because again, I want my students to be able to I want to be sure that my students would really watch the video. I'll translate it to Edpuzzle so that after that 15 minutes, I will just give them series of activities that they're going to do after watching the video so that I could still check if they indeed get the content that I'm able to share to them through the video. Write scripts. Because when you have scripts, it's easy for you to really check what exactly do you want to say about that slide, and you're mindful of the time that you're going to consume for that specific slide, and at the same time you're going to be very mindful also of the time that you're going to spend in each slide. Third, create or curate appropriate content. What do you mean when you say create or curate? Create is like example, you're making the PowerPoint yourself, or curate meaning if you're going to borrow PowerPoint or materials from other sources, it's good also to always acknowledge the owner of that specific material. Don't just include that in your presentation without citing them. Remember, again, veer away from cases of plagiarism and copyright infringement. Make sure also that you watch curated videos, especially if you're teaching elementary, you're teaching the primary level. It's good that you really watch the video, know the content that you're presenting, or if the video is quite long, trim it and focus on the content that you really just want your students to watch. Why? Again, if we're not mindful of all these things, we might go down the pit of parent complaints because there are a lot. Remember, in a remote setup, the parents are very present. The parents can easily escalate problems or not so good feedback when we're doing remote learning. So again, it's about being mindful of the things that we're presenting to our students during remote learning. Fourth, choose the screencast method. So are you going to utilize it for synchronous learning? Are you going to record it? Are you going to turn it into a video? Will you edit it? Again, choose your screencast method. Once you choose your screencast method, check for accountability, cite sources. Again, even in your remote classes, you got to remind your students how to behave. I like it a while ago that Miss Mikay even reminded us of how we're going to behave before we start the lesson or before we start the webinar, because again, this establishes order in your class, and even the manner of how people will behave in your class. Ensure that there's access for all. If you don't have the technology, it's good to resort to printouts. If you only have the storage devices, let's say if you only have CDs or the thumb drives for that matter, go back to it. If you want to utilize TV or radio, go back to it. If you want to use paper, rely on your books, go back to it. Ensure that there's access for information to all. That's not going to be limited to the small amount of your class. Again, it's supposed to be, technology is not supposed to be a divider of classes. It's supposed to be an enabler of skills for everybody. So if they don't have it's okay. Be creative in ensuring that there's access of information to everybody. Test for comprehension, particularly for formative assessment. If you're fortunate enough that you have technology at hand, don't just let your video be placed on a video itself. Again, I advise you put it on Edpuzzle or Play Pause It, so that you can have proofs that indeed your students utilized or watched the video. Be open to feedback, because sometimes our audio may have difficulty. We cannot be heard. Our video might be hazy. Our fonts might be too little. The kids cannot visualize our presentation. So allow them to give you feedback, because through these feedback, you can be able to improve the way you present yourself, conduct yourself on a remote setup. Make yourself available. Make your students know when you are available. Remember, it's not only remote classes or remote work that we're doing every day. We need to establish schedule. Let's be real. You can also be, let's say, a mom in your house. You can also be a daughter in your house. You can also be another person in the house. I'm sure you have other things to do in the house. Imagine if you're a teacher and you're also manning the remote class of your kids. If you remember the video that I showed you in the beginning, imagine the mom manning 3 children all at the same time for remote learning. I think that mom is quite fortunate because they have the blessing, they have the resources, because each of her child would have a computer which they can use for the remote learning. What if they don't have? And what if each of you will have to share the resource? So again, you need to be able to manage a schedule for everybody so that you could be able to ensure that everybody would be able to do their work. Also, you being the person, the teacher involved, you need to also make sure that you give your students your schedule so that you don't spread yourself too thinly. Because in a remote setup, everybody can be vulnerable to persistent parents or even persistent students, that they're bugging you even the wee hours of the day. So you got to provide them schedule, because again, you're also doing other things in real life. But motivate them. Try to motivate your kids. Try to always get where they're coming from. Try whenever you do remote learning, it's good to have icebreakers. It's good to like make them tell small stories, make them tell small anecdotes of what they're experiencing. Again, it humanizes your class. You have to go back to that idea that despite the separation, there's supposed to be a humanizing factor that would unite all of you despite the distance. Last but definitely not the least, get your parents and admin on board. A remote setup will not be successful if you don't get the support of the school authorities and at the same time your parent authorities and even your parents for that matter, the parents of your students for that matter. It's good that they have a copy of the policies that would prevail in your class, a general policy that would prevail in your school. I'm sure last meeting, in the last session, the last webinar, the previous speaker was able to provide you what are the things that the school should be preparing when you transition to a remote learning. In my case, it's good also that as teachers, you need to also discuss to your students what are the guidelines that they need to observe when they conduct remote sessions. Synchronous, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous. It's good also that the parents should be able to sign that so that in case um, it's also a backbone for you. It's also a protection for you whenever you conduct these lessons. It's good to also provide the teachers and the parents the idea of how are you going to grade their kids, the schedule that you're going to provide for their children, so that again it's about awareness of how they're going to be able to man the classes that you're going to do for a remote setup. Here again, for those who still wanted to connect, here are my contacts for Microsoft ambassadors. Again, for Microsoft ambassadors who wanted achievement codes for this training webinar. Again, the the achievement code is there. And at the same time, for those of you who wanted to have access for the PowerPoint, again, the link is also here, tinyurl.com, Duado Pressman. Again, thank you very much for listening. I would be delighted to hear some questions. Thank you. I can't hear you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
So, very comprehensive, um,
I can't hear you well.
oh, how about, yeah, how about now?
You're quite soft though.
Hello? Is this better?
I can hear you. Yeah, way better. Yeah, way better but soft.
All right. Soft,
Yeah.
soft. I'll try to speak loudly. Is this better?
Yeah.
Better. All
Better,
right.
way better.
Yes, we can jump right into our first question. I think this is very relevant kasi kagabi lang ata nag-announce ang ating presidente
Yes.
about his opinion on school opening, no?
Oo nga,
So,
nakita ko nga.
yes, do you agree on President Duterte's stand that no face-to-face classes be held unless there is vaccine against COVID-19?
You know, how do you say this? You know, a president would always be protecting the interests of every person. Imagine you being the father of a child, and your child will be very vulnerable to being sick, and there's no way for that child to get healed if in case the child would get in contact with that sickness. I'm looking at it on that perspective. But on the perspective of a teacher, on a personal note, I don't agree that learning would stop because of this pandemic. Right
Yes.
now, you're able to prove that there's learning existing despite the fact that there's a pandemic happening, right? Um, right. So if you're only after face-to-face learning, definitely that's considerable. Uh, I would understand where he is coming from because he's just guarding the interest, particularly of the kids who might get the disease quickly. We all know our kids. When they go to school, they run everywhere. They love interacting with each other. And they can easily be prone with sickness. And I understand that. But if there are institutions that are willing to adapt different ways of learning that would allow allow everybody to still continue learning and even provide economy for teachers like us, why not, right? How can you open the minds of parents about it? I think if you go back to what um, Professor Che yesterday, if your education transition plan is really well placed, and if it's well articulated to your parents, if it's well explained to your parents, how exactly would your teachers teach? How exactly would the classes be conducted? How exactly will schedules be done? What kind of schedule will be there? Or who's going to teach? If all these things are answered, I'm sure there will be a mind shift for everybody. Even parents are like us. They're also anxious about this new normal that we're experiencing. They're not aware of what's these things that we're into also. They're also caught into this rupture of nowhere. And right. And if we get to articulate a good education transition plan, let's say if you wanted to transition into remote learning, which will assure them of schedule, teaching methods, assessment, again, of the different aspects that I mentioned a while ago, parents would definitely be your first-hand support. They would even lobby for you. Again, you just have to answer their question. Again, because they're also embarking this boat like us. They don't even know how to face this also. So it goes back to how your admin will be able to explain it and how us teachers would be able to conduct it well in our classes. And at the same time, how would it be translated well to the students? And we're not going to make the students feel that they're just stressed out because work will just be piling up to them. So I think that's how I'm going to that's my opinion on the matter. It doesn't really matter for me if you stop face to face. Yes, I agree to that. Um, if there's no vaccine, no face to face yet, but if institutions have the capacity to transition into an online on a remote setup, why not? But again, my answer is make sure that there's a well articulated remote learning plan which can be understood by the parents so that they are going to be guarded on how to really make sure that their children are really working at home.
Yes. Correct, ma'am. I agree with what you said na yes, priority pa rin nga yung health natin, but learning shouldn't stop. There are ways to push learning forward pa rin despite
Right.
what we are experiencing.
I agree.
So to follow up on that, marami rin po kasing nagtatanong, especially from the schools outside Metro Manila, yung medyo remote and walang internet access. Siyempre, iba rin yung context nila. And they want to ask then, how can they continue sa kanila namang mga schools?
Right. If again, that's why my answer a while ago is more geared towards those who have the resources to transition with the utilization of technology. What if you don't have? Utilize whatever you have. If you are still using the books, if you still have books, use books. The more important thing is for me, the instruction should be given well, articulated well to the students. Example, if you have the capacity to do printing materials, or you could be able to, like example, do printouts, provide students printouts on
Mm-mm.
how will they be able to read books, how will they be able to answer questions. You need to teach them also a way on how to be able to answer all these things,
Correct. Yes.
so that they're not learning. Like example, it's not I would like to tell you also that it's not only a problem experience in the Philippines. It's
Yes.
also a problem happening in the United States. I had a recent conversation with teachers in the United States. Some of them, because of this rapid transition to online learning, they were asked to give activities online. But not all students have the access to internet. Like example, the teacher I'm conversing with is stationed in a remote area in New Mexico.
Mm.
And and the area where she's teaching is surrounded by farmlands. Not
Oh.
all these children have access to internet.
Mhm.
So she
Mhm.
offers her students to give her an answer for the activities that she gave remotely. So the division of New Mexico, how did the school how did the division of Mexico augment the problem? Like example, particularly period of remote learning, or the period when the pandemic was declared, students were not graded. They were just asked if they were just asked to look into the material, if they have proofs to show that they were able to see the material, they have access to material, they would just give those proofs to the teacher. But they're not graded on the material.
Mm.
Again, because they're not you cannot force families to have something that they
Yes.
cannot afford, right?
Correct. Correct.
Right. So it's also the same thing with the Philippines. We cannot just force these parents to example, buy a cell phone or buy a computer right away because you're transitioning to blended learning. Unless you're going to be as fortunate as Pasig that your local government is going to give you. I mean, right, and right, because there are local government units that are really exploring on possibility of extending help for public schools, right? And
Yes.
Pasig is one of them. So if you're fortunate to be in Pasig, right, you're blessed. But not all people, right? But not all people in the Philippines are like that. So
Mhm.
again, my 2 cents would
Mm.
be, do not force yourself if you cannot,
Yes.
right?
Correct.
Charity begins at home. You cannot give what you don't have. So
Mhm.
if you
Mhm.
only have these books, if you have these like CD in school, if your kids would have thumb drive in schools,
Mm.
put all these in your thumb drives and then make them watch that in their computers, or even uh in their computers at home. Do that so
Mm-mm.
that you have access to it, whatever resources you made them do. Or example, um there are televisions these days that are offering free courses. Example, they're opening Cine Escuela. They're opening now the old school way of learning before, right?
Correct.
I live with Cine Escuela. I live with Math Tinik, right? So
Ako din, ma'am. Yes.
right, and those are really um educative um tools,
Mm.
which for me is a good resort for those people who are really having difficulty with resources for
Mm.
this types of learning.
Mm.
So meron pa ako before, naka VHS pa yan. Hindi ko lang alam kung may VHS pa ngayon, 'di ba? No ba? 'Di
Medyo
ba?
mahirap nang hanapin, ma'am. But
Right, pero
meron
'di
pa
ba?
rin.
But there are schools, I'm sure, 'di ba, na meron pang mga ganyan. Kasi
Mm.
again, ito ba yung isang mindset, wag nating gawing white elephant yung mga resources natin, lalo sa public school. When I visit public schools, pag kunyari yung mga bagong donate ng somebody, ayaw gamitin kasi baka masira. Let's not turn them into white elephants. Use them. The more you use them, the more you get to explore. Ay, nako, luma na pala to, kailangan na tong palitan. That's when you get to discover the capacity of whatever is given to you. And at the same time, that could also bridge your own capacity as a personnel, the user of those technology. And that could also be translated to your students. So yun, don't force yourself. Kung papel. Kung Manila paper.
Yes.
Or example, kung there are times that when I teach economics, when I cannot record, lalo na pag umuulan, it's so difficult to record your video, lalo na pag umuulan. What I do, I write it on paper, I write a solution, I capture it with my phone, and whatever videos captured by my phone, I send it to my students.
Oo, yun na ang ipapadala.
Right. Or even video. I'm sure everybody in the Philippines would have a mobile phone.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Utilize
More population.
Right. Utilize your mobile phone. Right?
Yes.
Especially those teaching math. Diba? Write it on your hand. You can even record your voice. Explain it to them. How did you arrive at that answer? Right? You don't need sophisticated technology for you to do remote learning. Whatever you have, use it. And then just make sure that your voice is clear enough for your students to understand you. Kailangang malinaw yung boses. Kasi minsan pag hindi malinaw yung boses, lalo lang nagkakaroon ng mga tanong. Lalo lang masisira yung, sana nagturo na lang ako, di ba? Ikaw din mismo frustrate ka, di ba?
Yes. Siguro, ma'am, yung frustration kasi is coming from meron namang existing technologies, pero hindi ko access yung technology. Pero, yeah, I guess our teachers need to hear that it's okay if you don't access those technologies. We can actually go to what we have, and as na meet pa rin natin yung goals natin as a teacher, pati yung students natin keep on learning, then there's no problem.
Right. You don't need sophisticated technology. What you need to, again, as I mentioned a while ago, pedagogy is above your technology. Your technology is just an enabler of whatever it is that you're going to teach in your classroom.
Agree. So, siguro yung next question natin, ma'am, since maraming pwede namang mag-online, what's the recommended time na ma-involve yung students sa isang like online class, for example? The time they spend.
Right. How long? As I said a while ago, on research, this is based on research, the normal time that a student can survive a remote setup is, again, 1/3 of your instructional time. So example, 1/3. So example, ako, I teach normally on for an hour. I play my videos on a 10 to 15 minute range. Yun lang yung range ng video mo. So everything should be you have to capture everything in 10 to 15 minutes. Otherwise, believe me, the students will just breeze. Why are the kids like that? One, blame it to YouTube. Right? YouTube videos are so short, and yet they can easily get entertained. Right? Not only that, it's so short. The message that they get from YouTube videos are so direct that they can easily get what they wanted to send to the audience. That's the thing that we have to also remember when we do our videos. We have to be able to say what we wanted to say in a short time because our receivers, our kids, also think that way.
Correct. I agree.
Right. The rest of the time, kunyari 1 hour. The rest of the time, what I do, I make them do a mind map, mga graphic organizer, and then I make them submit it online. I don't check it, formative. Kasi nga, I just wanted them to provide me a proof that they did work. Right? The next activities that I'm going to give them are all related to, let's say, nagbigay na ako ng lecture video. So yung susunod na activity is, they would feel, if they didn't watch the video, sana nanood na lang ako ng video, hindi ko nasasagot yung activity.
Correct.
Right. So now they would, again, there's a sense of responsibility na you need, in Miss Emie's class, you need to do this. Otherwise, you would feel lacking. if you go to the next level. So you need to establish that policy in your class. Otherwise, you know our kids, mabilis silang manloko. At,
Yes.
diba, they can easily fool you because they're digital natives. They're good at technology. And most of us, let's be real, not all of us are blessed with that skill in technology. So you need what we're blessed of is pedagogy. We are good teachers. So we got to make them feel that we're really good at what we do.
Correct. Whatever the tool is, di ba, ma'am?
Right.
Sige, next question would be from Faye of ADMU. Sorry, from Anonymous. Could you suggest any content and tools to use in teaching children with special needs?
Nice. You know, I would be honest. I'm not a special education teacher, but I recommend that you go to education.microsoft.com. There is a lot of webinars in education.microsoft.com in the Microsoft Education Center that would allow you to explore different ways on inclusivity and accessibility. So it also highlights different tools that Microsoft would have that would enable kids or even teachers to be empowered on how to put more premium on inclusivity and accessibility. Again, let me repeat that, the Microsoft Education Center, it's education.microsoft.com.
Thank you for that, ma'am. Siguro we can entertain one last question.
Sige lang.
All right. Siguro, from Cherry Coloma, can you give strategies on how remote learning can be effective in early childhood education?
Right. Similar to what I mentioned a while, I'm not an early childhood teacher. That's for sure.
Yes.
I don't want to, again, in the beginning, I already established my context. But similar to what I just mentioned a while ago, in Microsoft, there are also courses that would enable teachers to be empowered and be given the strategy on how to attack primary level students, particularly in remote setup. Again, the website is education.microsoft.com. Education.microsoft.com has a lot of webinars, has a lot of exercises, in fact, that would empower teachers on how to be able to do so, on how to be able to do remote learning in any, whether it's in the primary level or in the middle school or even in the high school level. So there are a lot of activities there that you can look into.
Yes, all right. I guess that's it for today. Thank you, ma'am, for answering those questions really well. For tomorrow, I just want to have a few announcements. Hold on, yes. For tomorrow, our topic would be on the strategies on how to use Microsoft 365 and MS Teams for online teaching. I know a lot of teachers are really waiting for this. They want to maximize their Microsoft 365 accounts. And tomorrow we will have an in-depth demo of how you can actually use that by Mr. Raymond, Africa of Manila, Xiamen International School. So we hope we could see you again tomorrow for the third day of our webinar series. And before we end, I will announce our raffle winner for today. And our raffle winner is Mr. Alden Garcia of University of the Assumption, City of San Fernando, Pampanga. So, Sir Alden, if you're watching right now, just message us on Facebook and send us your address and we will send you your prize. So again, thank you so much, Ma'am Emie. Thank you for joining us. We've learned so much from you. And the challenge now is i-apply na natin, mga teachers. Apply what you've learned today. And we hope that what you learned will enrich your teaching and the learning of your students. So yes, thank you for joining us this afternoon and see you tomorrow.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.